You're listening to The Moose and the Loose, your 10 minutes action-packed financial podcast with your host, Mike Yahoo. Hey, what's up, Market Moose? Mike from The Moose on the Loose. Happy Monday. As you know, this week I do have my most popular dividend webinar. So Dividend Income for Life, over 1,000 people as registered already. It's going to be a lot of fun. So you can register at moosemarkets.com/webinar. So it's moosemarkets.com/webinar, or you go in the show note. The webinar is 100% free. I do have a presentation about my investing strategy. And today, one of the key point of that strategy is to identify the safety of your dividends. And that is often something that is forgotten about. And I don't know why. Like, a lot of investors are just like, yeah, that company has paid a dividend for a long while. It's a high yield. I just love it. So that's their dividend safety analysis. They could go one more notch and say, oh, payout ratio is good. So there you go. Anything under 80%, that's safe enough for me. I think there's a lot of things missing, and this is why I want to talk about. So the way that we have solved the solution at Dividend Stocks Rock is we have created a rating. So of course, super original, right? So we do have a rating, a dividend safety score from 1 to 5. But the idea here, and this is what I want to talk about, is that you can build your own safety score or own like dividend rating. Call it whatever you want, doesn't really matter. But like, the important is to determine if the dividend that you have are safe or not. And by rating them, it's easier to compare. Because, I mean, if you give like a bunch of 3s to companies and then you look at their dividend triangle, so their ability to grow their revenue, to grow their earnings, and to grow their dividend, well, some of them may not be alike, and therefore you will have to change some of your 3s into 2s or into 4s, or change the ratings to get just basket, like literally like categorizing companies into baskets. And this is what we have done at DSR. So we're going to start with dividend safety score of 1. So that is also called dividend trash. Companies that have cut their dividend, that we don't like, that have failed our investors. Not going to spend too much time on this one. A good example would be Algonquin. Algonquin, dividend trash, cut their dividend twice. There's nothing else to say. I mean, bad management, bad business model, made a lot of mistakes. I got burned too on the first dividend cut, so I'm raising my hand on this one. I feel your pain, but I quickly moved on because it has no place in my portfolio for this type of company. And then in the dividend safety score of 2, you have 2 categories, and this is why it's interesting. So by definition, a 2 at DSR is a company that has not increased its dividend for like 18 to 24 months or more. So a stable dividend, but that has not been increased. That's usually a big red flag. So that's category A for a 2. Companies like Transcontinental, TCL. It has been, I think, 4 years now with no dividend increase. So you're going to say, oh, but Mike, look at the yield. It's great. Yeah, but if you look at the dividend triangle, you will notice that this company is struggling. Cannot find a way to generate revenue growth, cannot find a way to generate earnings growth, and therefore the dividend remains stable. The yield seems great at like 5%-ish. But if the business is not able to go back in growth mode at one point, well, you know what's going to happen? The dividend will have to go. So there is, most of the 2s are either like, yeah, you can surf on those, but eventually you're going to get a dividend cut, or you're actually going to get given a passive cut just because of inflation. There is a category B, though, that is really interesting for the dividend safety score of 2. So see how the importance of putting numbers into context and to understand. At DSR, Constellation Software, one of my top 10 holding, has a dividend safety score of 2 because it is not a dividend grower. So we have to highlight that. Constellation Software pays a $1 USD dividend for ages now. They just forgot about it. It's like not even a yield anymore. So the company has a different strategy for their capital allocation, and this is why it's not increasing its dividend. Canadian Pacific CP would also have a dividend safety score of 2. So not to say that it's a bad dividend, but you're not buying this company for the dividend growth. It's not going to happen, or like from time to time it's going to happen, but very rarely. So you will buy it for a great dividend triangle. So for Constellation Software, the revenue, the earnings, even the free cash flow, it's growing all the time. So they're just using all their capital to buy new businesses, to make more acquisitions and create more value to shareholders. So I buy in this thesis and I look at the rest of the dividend triangle without the dividend growth, and I'm happy to have it. So there's two categories for a rating of 2. Now moving to a 3. A 3 would be like a company that increases its dividend every year, but not by a big number. So low single digit, pretty much matching the inflation or doing a little bit better than inflation. I think the perfect example of a 3 would be Enbridge. So Enbridge, very stable business, long-term contract for their pipelines, the ability to increase the price. Their customers have to pay regardless if they use the pipeline or not. So it's a great way to make business, predictable cash flow, all of those things. But it's capital intensive. It's not geared towards growth, but more geared toward stability. So it offers a dividend increase of 3% year over year. So very stable. I like it, but it cannot be a 4 because it's not that generous. So that's the reason why a company like Enbridge is qualified as a 3. And bonus point, if you look at the classic payout ratio, they're through the roof. They don't make any sense because they use their own made payout ratio, which is called the distributable cash flow payout ratio. So money that is available for distribution instead of using earnings, because earnings are hurt by amortization, by other non-cash impact items, and Enbridge has a lot of those because they're capital intensive. So for that reason, you have to dig a little bit deeper to understand if the dividend is safe or not. Moving to the two favorite categories, actually, the 4s are a lot more popular and a lot more numerous at Dividend Stocks Rock than the 5s. The 5s are like super rare, but in the 4s, you will find companies growing their dividend every year, of course, but then showing a strong dividend triangle, so constant revenue and earnings growth, and the dividend has to grow by more than 5% per year. So those are, I would call like kind of like the perfect dividend growers, because you have a company that is, yes, growing all the time. So it has like multiple growth vectors, but they're generating so much cash flow that they are able to A, reinvest in the business to assure more growth coming, and B, reward shareholders with generous dividend increases. So one of my favorite example here would be National Bank has been increasing its dividend by 6-7% every year. But when you look at their dividend triangle over the past 5 years and 10 years, it is just a beauty. Everything grows high single digit to almost double digit year over year for revenue, earnings per share, and dividend growth over the past 5 years. And therefore, they deserve a rating of 4. For the 5s, I don't have that many. I keep that for like very like rare companies that are able for a long period of time to increase their dividend by at least 10%. So those are very, very rare. You need to have a company that has like a very low payout ratio. A good example over the past 5 years would be Couche-Tard. Couche-Tard has grown its dividend by 24% annualized growth rate. Like 24, that's crazy. It's likely going to slow down, and then probably the rating is going to go back to a 4 at one point. In my opinion, you cannot really maintain a 5 because a 5 would be like, or Visa is a 5 because it grows double digit as well for several years. So that's also a great example of a company that has a lot of room for growth and therefore has still a lot of room to increase their dividend by at least 10% per year. So again, they're pretty rare. From time to time, you will even find a company at DSR that shows like 10% annualized growth rate, and it will just be rated as a 4. I tend to be very, very careful about the 5s, and they don't necessarily keep those ratings forever either. So it's a way. I mean, it's definitely not perfect. We're making mistakes as any other rating systems, but the usefulness of having a rating system from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 is to be able to compare your companies. So if all your stocks are rated as 4, that's probably wrong, and you should have like a distribution there, unless they all have similar financial metrics and a lot of growth potential. So it's just to highlight where you might find like possible weakness among your stock allocation, and maybe you can find a better company in the same industry with like stronger financial metrics. So having a strong focus on dividend safety and dividend growth is super important. Again, don't forget to register to my webinar, Dividend Income for Life. We're going to talk about the myth of high yield stocks. We're going to talk about how to select quality income companies. Also, I will provide you with a full example of a retirement portfolio based on my investment strategy and how I would withdraw money from it. So a combination of dividend and selling shares without getting caught by a market downturn. So that's the most important part, because when you sell shares, you don't want to sell them when the market is down. But there is a strategy that solves this problem. So you can retire happy with a low yield, high growth stock portfolio that is a lot safer and a lot better than a high yield one. So go to moosemarkets.com/webinar, and I will see you there on next Thursday. In the meantime, don't forget to stay invested.
Hey, welcome to the disclaimer. If you're listening to The Moose and the Loose, you cannot really expect me to give you buy or sell recommendation or financial advice, right? You're here for fun, you're here for information and some entertainment. But I am not your financial advisor, I am not your broker, so therefore I'm not liable if you're losing money after listening to the podcast. If you're looking for some advice, go see a professional. If not, you can enjoy the show and do your due diligence after it.